Well, hello, hello. Fancy meeting you here.
Hello, hello, hello.
I think I think today's actually the first time I've seen you back on camera at all since Hacker Summer Camp.
Yeah, I think so. I say you've been out all week down with the DEF CON crud.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, I brought home a consolation prize from Vegas, and it's my first go at COVID since it happened, 4.5 years ago. So
Yeesh.
so far it's winning.
Yeah, I say, but still stuck it out for this. Excited to see everybody on and talk about SharpDragon.
Yeah, for July we put out some really interesting threats. I mean, the Grim Resource one was awesome, putting
Yep.
out a threat that's basically taking advantage of the Microsoft Management Console and the MSC files that we use. And then this one that you're going to tell them about today, SharpDragon, with some episode domain abuse. This it was a cool month for threats.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I say so with our short window, I'll just jump right in. So the focus on today's Threat Thursday is the SharpDragon threat that came out, I guess, last month. So SharpDragon is a Chinese APT that has recently been observed conducting campaigns across Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Caribbean, which is interesting in and of itself. But today we're really going to focus on a more novel technique that they've been utilizing that we think is a little more interesting to talk about that we've seen in their campaigns, which is the app domain abuse. So Windows application domain abuse is essentially when you sideload a malicious payload or DLL into a digitally signed Microsoft executable via a .config file. So what does all that mean, right? I feel like it's a little easier to show that one than try to explain it. So what we have here, get my screen set right, is so in our threat we copy this Microsoft UEV sync controller over to this directory that we made inside of Windows apps. So all of your Microsoft Windows apps will exist inside of this directory, and they should end with this 8W 8WEK, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of like a placeholder that Microsoft has for this current version that we're on. So we copied this executable from system 32 into this directory that we made, which looks totally legit. We have this .config file in here, which, if you notice, is the same name as our digitally signed Microsoft executable, and then we have a DLL in there also. So how app domain abuse works, the sideloading of it, is if you have a digitally signed Microsoft executable and you have this .config file, this executable will look inside of the config file for basically steps or instructions to tell it what to do, what to load, what to execute, what to run. Very similar to how DLL sideloading works, where it looks, it has an order of operations of where it looks in to get its instructions of what to execute. But instead of an order of instructions, this explicitly will tell it what to run. So I pulled up the .config file over here. See, not super complicated, only 9 lines, and half of them are are just like the header information, right? But the main thing we're looking at here is this domain manager assembly value. So what that's doing is that is telling our executable that when you assemble this, when the loader assembles it, look for this DLL and load this DLL. So as you can see, the net GAC helper is the same as this malicious DLL that we have right here. And you can see in this corner, I pulled up this this little PowerShell script one-liner to prove that this is a Microsoft digitally signed executable in regards to this Microsoft UEV sync controller. So in our threat, we have the .config file, which is a malicious config file that we've made that'll be downloaded. We copy the legitimate Microsoft executable over into the same directory, and we download this DLL that we also have crafted to do some system enumeration as well as C2 check-in. So how it's going to run once all that is downloaded, we're going to start this executable, which is then going to look at this .config file, which is going to read this, point out this net GAC helper, run that. It's going to create our system info file right here, the system info.txt, which will just perform some normal normal host enumeration, kind of system enumeration type stuff, which this is the same information that we pulled from the SharpDragon report. This is the observed information that they're pulling back. So program files, system processes, host name, operating system, things like that, as well as it's going to then go ahead and shoot some C2 check-ins. So again, based off of observed C2 servers of SharpDragon, it's going to try to reach out to those to communicate, do a kind of check-in, things like that. So that is the basis of kind of what the threat was built around. Obviously, in this, you could have your instructions or your DLL do anything, right? It doesn't have to be something as simple as like system enumeration or C2 check-in. It could be, something a little more nefarious, like ingress tool transfer, downloading some more malicious files or malicious payloads, running some kind of ransomware or something like that. And then we also, in our threat, let me share that screen to show you guys the threat that we're talking about. That screen's going weird. In our threat, we also have it create a bit of persistence via the run key. So it goes in and it sets the run key to then look at that known Microsoft executable that we stored inside of our Windows app. Oh, my screen's not shared. Hold on a second, guys. Sorry about that. Yes, you know what? I'll break the rule of sharing and just share my whole screen. How about that?
There we go.
It goes in there. There we go. So you see, we go in there, and we also set via PowerShell this run key entry that'll go in and run that executable that we set inside of our Microsoft apps directory that we created, which again is the correct directory for the apps to be in. They just, for some reason, will let anybody write to it. We utilize those in a few of our threats, and it's a great place to hide out. It looks totally normal. All these system names and DLLs really blend in well with something that you would expect, right?
Yeah, what's interesting is seeing how these kind of techniques always change just a little bit over time, but it's still some of the same thing as like DLL side loading, or even going back to as simple as like the old get elevation from things like Slack or Teams, where you would just create a new directory one revision higher than the current stable and put your payload there. When you restart the app or the host restarts, it'll run your version instead of the old one. And boom, now you've got access.
Yeah, for sure.
I do think it's been. Go ahead.
Oh, I would say, yeah, definitely, again, utilizing kind of like the living off the land, native directories that they have in there, using the system and its files and how the system works to your advantage is such a huge plus and a great way to blend in and kind of try to evade some detections.
I think it has been really cool how they've been using this in tandem. The one thing this group has been known for and that they've seen through these recent campaigns was extremely complex phishing campaigns. Like their lures were really good. They're targeting these government entities from these regions you were just mentioning earlier. And as they're doing it, they're using that organizational trust, like what you would expect that like some government organ in the Caribbean is exactly who they say they are. The email's coming from a trusted source. So they use that and spread around, taking advantage of it. And it's been working extremely well from them from what we can see so far.
Yeah, for sure. But say before, I don't have it pulled up now, but before they were SharpDragon, they had another name because they were affecting other areas, and it's the same TTP
Sharp
as
Panda.
Sharp Panda. Yeah, so over affecting Chinese government, or not Chinese government, or Chinese ABT. That'd be crazy. But affecting other regions in Asia, other governments in Asia, and you see that they're just taking those same tactics and techniques and the same novel technique of the app domain abuse and just rolling it over all across the world. Everybody uses Microsoft. Every government in the world uses Microsoft. Yeah, so very, very interesting. One point on it that I had forgot to mention is, so one of the uses of having the DLL load and our specific DLL load in our threat is our DLL, the netgac helper.dll, performs those enumeration actions as well as those C2 check-ins I was talking about. Those are performed via native window API calls. So there's no child processes created from that executing. The only thing you're going to see in your logs is the execution of that Windows executable. The what's the name of it? The Microsoft UEV sync controller. You're going to see that executing, which I can show here in our Splunk logs. So we can see that executing here from inside of that directory right here with the start. So we can see that executing, which at first glance looks totally fine, right? I mean, it's inside of the Microsoft's local app data. It's inside the Windows apps. It has this not known good, but kind of like this standard nomenclature of how it should look, right? So if you're just looking at this, nothing super crazy here. I mean, this setting the item path inside of your run key should definitely trigger something, which we hit on down here in suspicious run key creation. But there's not a lot here to see in the logs. So there's, out of all of the actions that occurred, there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, let's say 9 processes that are created off of it. That could easily be overlooked, especially in a large enterprise environment or something like that.
For sure. And as a defender, like even me right now looking at that, I automatically just associate that crazy key at the end, the AWEK.
Yep.
Oh, that's no good. It's
Yep.
it's a Microsoftism.
Yeah.
So I don't think of that as something new or that was created, because most people don't really realize that you can mess with that directory, or just make a new folder name the same thing, because you can.
Yeah, very straight. I mean, you don't even have to have admin permissions to go in there and create a directory inside of it. It's a great place to hide, just a little more in depth from just app data or temp or public, kind of typical places that you would look at. Yeah, it's just a great way to go a little bit deeper. One of the things also that kind of came from this thread and had me thinking for more of the blue side, and I know that we talk about this probably every time we do a Threat Thursday. I think I say this probably at least once a week, is monitoring for parent image, who is loading what is so important. So here, while you can see that like these command line arguments maybe aren't super crazy, they could go by, you could put a 20-minute delay inside of all these, and it would be hard to see, right? If you were to see these logs just coming in, it wouldn't be anything crazy. But when you look at what is executing this, that's when you can really see that, like, hey, this needs to be looked at a little bit more. We need to have a little more care and diligence into what is happening here. So looking at anything that spawns CMD or PowerShell is such a huge win. In this example, it's just running out of this user profile, but more than likely, if this was a phishing campaign, like you were saying, it would be loaded either from downloads, or it would be loaded from like Outlook's temporary files or Outlook's local data, something like that. So if you see a parent image that is something not in program files or something not in system 32, that definitely warrants a little investigation.
No, that makes perfect sense, my dude.
Yeah. So for our detections here, we don't have a ton. There's not a ton really written to the host. There's not a lot that's being recorded, as it is utilizing those native Windows APIs I was talking about to run everything. So some of the ones that we did point out are, again, knowing what image is loading what. Cannot stress how important that is. Then we have just run key creation. So just like monitoring your run keys, your startup directories, your startup folders, run keys, things like that, things that are going to start on their own. You want to always monitor that. It's a great place to keep persistence. And even though it sounds silly, I've learned about run keys in like the most basic security course I was in. It seems so simple, but adversaries still use it. It's used all the time. And even though it's simple and it's obvious to look there, people obviously don't. And that's why it continues to be used. So, harping on that, monitor your run keys. You shouldn't have too much stuff being in there or new items being added to it, especially one with, again, that parent image of TT SharpDragon. Like if you see that, that should, that should get you thinking. And then the next kind of detection or log that we see here is suspicious process creation location. That's fun to say. So in that, it's just looking for executables that are running, processes being created inside of directories that are abnormal, which to me, an abnormal directory is anything that's not program files, x86, and anything not in system32. If it's not in there and it's executing, I want to know about it, right? And then the last one that we have, is not so much of a detection, but more of just something to monitor. So in this is cheating a little bit because I know what the executable is, but we also know what the executable is from these other detections that I have a little higher up. So if you're looking at this, you have this dashboard that has, suspicious parent image, run keys, process creation location, whatever. You can see that this TT SharpDragon is hit on all of these. You can go and craft a search, which basically will take the host, which you're gonna have to, do a little searching to see. But even if you take that host out, you want to see everything that it's on. You can just do host equals star. Event code 3, which in Sysmon is network connections. And then you want to put that image or parent image, you can do both, of TT SharpDragon in there and see who it's talking to. So we see that TT SharpDragon, which is loaded out of that user profile I was talking about, is reaching out to this 3.131 and this 18.220. So that would be something else to investigate. So you have an executable that's running in a strange location, started by, or which spawns command prompt. It's messing with your run keys. It's running out of a weird spot. And maybe with a little bit of investigation, you realize that, hey, I don't have this app installed. Like these, inside of these apps should be like Notepad or sticky notes or whatever. You'd be like, I don't have anything that should be running this. It's got a new DLL in there, and it's reaching out to these two sites. I should probably investigate what these two sites are, right? So that's kind of how you can take it from something as simple as it running out of a strange place and kind of going down all the way to figure out, is this malicious? Is this something I need to take a little more time and look at? Things like that. One thing that we didn't hit on here, which I think is a big one, but in our Sysmon configuration, we didn't have it loaded to capture this at the time, is that executable is loading a DLL that is not digitally signed. The DLL is not signed by anything. It's not from Microsoft. It wasn't copied from on the system. That DLL was crafted by Jake Williams, Malware Jake, who do it on site on our C2. We downloaded it, and then a legitimate Microsoft executable is then loading that malicious unsigned DLL and executing it. So we don't have the ability via our Sysmon config to see that image being loaded. But if you have an EDR or something that looks at DLLs or memory or things like that, you would be able to see that, and that should be highlighted. If you have something being loaded that's not signed or new, that's something that should be a little bit of concern. But it also costs a little bit of money and some tooling to have, or some express tooling in Sysmon that we just didn't have in our lab at the time, but definitely something else to monitor. Yes.
I do think it's really interesting as we went through this one. It's a little different than all of the other threats we've shown off before. Usually we could rely very heavily on Sysmon, on the endpoint logs and things like that to find all of the particular behaviors and things that would key us to this threat. With this one, that's not the case. With this one, you're almost going to be heavily reliant on your boundaries, your gateways. So like your email gateway, your firewalls, things like that, looking for the telemetry to that known bad C2 to the phishing emails. And the other thing I would highlight here, they heavily use Cobalt Strike. So if your current defensive toolset has the ability to kind of search that out and find no bad C2, that would be extremely helpful here.
Yeah, sure. I say, but yeah, very interesting. And I think again that this just highlights something that we talk about every week, or however often we do these, every other week, in that the best detections are your state-based detections. So looking at changes. So the run key being changed, that's a detection. Seeing that network connection, that's a detection. New files in weird spots, executables running in weird spots. Like, so we weren't able to see the actual host enumeration or system enumeration. We weren't able to see that in the logs. We're just using sysmon. So if you have something a little fancier, or you have an EDR or something out there, maybe you'd be able to see those API calls. But even if not, even if you're just running sysmon or something like that, looking at Windows security events, you can see files being dropped. You can't hide that. You can see the network connections. You can't hide that. You can see that this process is spawning CMD or PowerShell. You can't hide that. So kind of focusing, this is just another great example of focusing on what is going to be there no matter what. Barring them going in and clearing the event logs, but your event logs should be pushed to your SIEM, so it doesn't matter if they clear it anyway. That's just another indication that something bad happened, right? So yeah, I know we harp on it all the time. We always harp on parent images, parent processes, and that state-based detections, but it's because they're important, and it's not an easy win, but it's definitely an easier way to look at it. One more thing, kind of going back from the detections, I know that we're just over, but we did talk for a minute, starting off, so we get an extra minute. But kind of switching back to the red side, you can craft that .config file for any Microsoft application that's written in .NET. Any .NET assembly, this will work on. So it's not just that specific file that we had mentioned, which I'll show again here, just so everybody can see it. But the yeah, it's not just this Microsoft UEV syscontroller.exe, which again, we just copied from System32. I think you could probably see that in, yep, you see it right there. We literally just copied it out of System32. But any .NET executable, you can use this attack on. And again, it's not limited to host enumeration or C2 check-in. You can craft it. You can craft your DLL to do whatever you want. Whatever you and ChatGPT can come up with. So it's definitely something very interesting, something to keep an eye out for, and something kind of new.
What's interesting here, that could be a really good one, again, talking about state-based. If you understand your endpoint baselines and what your organization uses, it wouldn't be hard to find all of the specific callouts for a config file that
Yep.
are there natively.
Mm-hmm.
And then anytime you see a new config file loaded, boom, that's automatically suspicious.
Yeah, for sure. I would think even, this would be a little more taxing on your detections, but if you're looking inside of the Microsoft app directory and you see an exe, a DLL, and a .config file all in one directory, send an alert. Something even as simple as that. If you're not constantly installing new things and you have a good baseline, that would probably be a pretty good detection, I think, or something at least to get started on, right? But that is just about our time. I definitely kind of bogarted this for a little more blue side. What it's doing is not super complicated, so I feel like kind of focusing more on how to see it, not really how to stop it, but how to see it, how to detect it, how to get alerted on it, is important.
For real. Well, that is another Threat Thursday down.
Yep.
So I think next thing we've got coming up is we got a workshop. Is it next week? I believe it's next
workshop
week.
Yeah. Next week, should be next Wednesday, I believe.
So if you haven't had a chance to play with Sigma before and you want to kind of get your hands dirty a little bit, we're going to do an awesome weaponizing Sigma workshop. Come check it out.
Yep, some more detection stuff. Going to deploy some more threats. Going to make some Sigma rules. Going to put them in the SIEM and find the bad guy. But thanks everybody for hopping on. We'll be back, I think, in 2 weeks to do another Threat Thursday. We're going to do them a little more often just because we're making a lot of new threats, a lot of new detections, and just kind of want to get it out to you guys and see what everybody thinks.
Cool. Well, until next time, y'all.